once you figure out things and you have a great service and people stay, that trajectory can be super quick. Guys, today what we're going to dive into is what I call the 4 stages of fitness business ownership, but the fitness business freedom. The reality here is if you are listening, you're probably not at Connor's stage. You're probably not at Mark's stage. All of you guys that are listening are at different stages of your business. And if you listen to advice from Mark on creating leaders within his gym, it's going to be awesome content. It'll be really useful at some point. But right now, that probably should not be your focus. As much as I want you to listen and smash like buttons and subscribe and do all that other shit that we want you to do, the reality is we are going to be most useful to you as mentors from afar and mentors up close if you want us to do that. But we're going to be most useful to you as a remote podcasty mentor if we give you stuff that is appropriate for where your level is right now. Because if you are just starting off and trying to make rent and survive, you need different advice from somebody who's at 40, 50K a month. They have an entire team around them and they're trying to develop a manager to be able to run the studio for them. So this episode is all about that. If you feel like you don't know what you need to focus on, you feel like you don't know where you should be putting your time, your energy, your money, etc., this episode is for you. Now, let's talk about the 4 stages of fitness business freedom as I see them. I called it self-employed survival as stage 1. And in that piece, I think regardless of where you get stuff, it was funny. We had a shared mentor back in the day that was like mad about another shared mentor that ended up leaving and starting his own thing. And he was like, you can't use the 4 mountains. The 4 mountains, dude, the 4 mountains is fucking Jim Collins. Like the 4 mountains is from 25 years ago of business ownership. They have very different tiers. This guy does the same thing. I'm reading it now, Ready, Fire, Aim. And it's like, he talks about the different stages of business ownership. And it's more like revenue and team-based. But I think for gym owners, like you're starting off, I think stage 1, you're just like self-employed and your number 1 priority across the board on pretty much any of these. It's like figure out a working acquisition model and then run that into the fucking ground and get really good at acquiring customers and develop yourself. If this is like your first rodeo in like real training and shit, develop yourself as a trainer, as a coach, so that you're getting people a good experience. Like I think that's stage 1. You're just trying to get butts in seats, trying to figure your shit out. You're trying to get good enough to where, and like your two focuses there are like service and acquisition. That's the only thing. If you're a solopreneur, it's service and acquisition. Those need to be your 2 things. If you're thinking about leadership, you're thinking about traction, you're thinking about fucking even like things like brand and shit, get the fuck out of here with that. Your logo doesn't matter, any of that stuff. Like it's just get butts in seats and get good at servicing those butts, right? Thing 2 is moving up management. So that's where you're starting. And there's blurred lines, like Connor mentioned, right? There's transition periods. It's not a clear cut fucking, oh yeah, look, I crossed this revenue mark. Now I am this. Nah, man, there's a transition point where you're starting to delegate little stuff. And this is an entirely different episode, but if like my theory of delegation for gym owners is let's delegate the thing that takes up the most of your time, that you hate and you suck at, and that has the lowest cost. And that's not just financial, but also opportunity cost of delegating, right? So if you hire a trainer, you're going to have to train that person up. You're going to have to coach them up on your system, the way you do things, everything else. If you hire a bookkeeper, every fucking gym owner sucks at book. There's 0.0001% of gym owners came to us from the accounting world. And I'm going to open a gym instead because those accountants have seen gym clients and they know how little fucking money they make before they work with us. And so bookkeeping is typically a very cheap thing. You don't have to train that person. They're already an expert. So there's no time cost of training that person up, and it can be done pretty cheaply, right? Depending on where you're getting it done. Marketing agency and automation systems. Like we're probably someone pretty fucking good to talk to when you've figured out service, you've gotten a handful of clients, you got a little bit of money where you can make some ROI on your ads and then start acquiring customers. Like we're probably a pretty good somebody to reach out to take Facebook ads off your plate, to take tech and automation and things like that off your plate. That's probably a pretty good thing to delegate because it's pretty fucking cheap. Too cheap, realistically. We need to raise our goddamn prices. Certainly cheaper than hiring a full-time trainer. And then that shit's off your plate. And then it's stages. Maybe you hire an admin. Maybe you hire your first part-time trainer. You're not full on, oh my gosh, my operation is delegated and I can leave for 4 weeks and the gym's going to grow. But you're in that. I am moving up managerially. I am starting to grow my team, and that's a blurred line. Kind of that entire stage 2, the way I think of it is like it's a big blurred line. Stage 3, the way I have it, and I want us to fight about this in this episode, is leveled up leader maker. again, because I love my alliteration. So that is where your gym is basically, for the most part, fully delegated to whatever extent you want to get it delegated. And you are creating other leaders within your team. So this is sort of maybe where, Mark, you were, I don't know, insert a year, two, whatever it is. And it's a long stage, right? So you're probably still there where you're creating leaders within your business so that you're not the only decision maker. I think one of the big things in business that is maybe the hardest stuff to delegate is like delegating big decisions where you trust your team to think like you or better than you and to make decisions on the business's behalf. And then you are stage 4, the independent investor is what I call it. And that's where basically you would just be having your CEO effectively, or operator, whatever you want to call it, report to you and send you the docs, and you're as involved or not involved as you want to be, right? This is where you have your multiple locations and whatever else. Those are blurred. I'm going to give the caveat here. Those are absolutely fucking blurred. You may not want to get to even stage 2. So in the article ages ago, self-employed survival, because initially when you're doing it all your own, you're literally just fighting to survive. You're fighting to keep the doors open, to make rent, et cetera, et cetera. There's some folks, even in our universe now, that they move into self-employed survival. I mean, self-employed survival, where I still remember this. I'm not going to give names, but like one of the guys that I was coaching, this is back when we were involved in that past engagement. One of the guys that I was coaching was taking home more money as a private personal trainer with no team than one of the guys that was fucking running the group and claiming he had $1 million gym. Now there's a different level of freedom with those individuals, but there's a world, if you just want to coach and train and what have you, that you can do fucking great as a trainer. And eventually your goals might change. Eventually you may want to remove yourself, but if you're happy doing all the training and that's what you just want to make a great income and be self-employed, I don't think leadership and business ownership is for everybody. So it's totally cool to fucking just build a great training business and serve those people and be self-employed. I don't mean that as a derogatory term. Those are sort of what I see as the 4 stages of fitness business freedom. So let's discuss that, see if we agree, disagree. We'll talk about focuses at each of the stages and see if we can't create some useful stuff for the people that are listening. So let's start with stage number 1. Let's talk about the stages. You guys, do you have deep disagreement about those stages, or you think they can be somewhat useful as frameworks to provide some context for folks that are listening?
That's good. Let's talk about it for sure.
Let's talk about it. So stage 1, self-employed survival. You've just started off your business. You could be subleasing space. You might have gotten your own space, whatever it is. Mark, what do you see as the focuses, maybe the big mistakes, what have you, in that self-employed survival stage of business?
Yeah, before we dive into the stages itself, I think it's important to always focus on where am I currently at and develop that filter as well. Just definitely learn from multiple people, that are in multiple stages and from past experiences, but having that filter of great, who's saying that and is it the right context? So that's my disclaimer before diving into this too. This stage 1, I can just reflect from my own personal experience where it is about the service, number 1, and then getting people to experience that service, right? Mm-hmm. So that's it. That's the focus, right? I know you have some more thoughts on the stage 1 where our emphasis should go. But for me, it was like, I didn't answer the phone, guys, for 3.5 years. Did I ever tell you this story?
No.
So like the quick story, I should say I did. And then I quickly learned, like, I'm a solo guy, right? I can't spend them. I had no skill on the phone. I had no system, no process. They would call and ask about training and I would answer their questions, right? And basically give mini coaching lessons on the phone. But I realized that it's a waste of my time. And ultimately, I didn't have time to do it well. And so I just made the voicemail say, like, thanks for calling Power Strength Training Systems. We're training clients. If you're interested, athlete or parent, please go to the website, fill out the contact form, and we'll get back to you about scheduling your free trial workout. That was the voice message almost to a T. And then if they went to I didn't have to respond to anybody. I didn't tell them to call them back. They went to the website, filled out the form, and I contacted them that way and filtered it. In hindsight, that created more of a velvet rope, which created a different, I guess, environment and atmosphere of doing it by accident. But the point being was, like, I just wanted to focus on the service. And by doing that, I had a raving fans that had that velvet rope experience. And then they went out and told people, AKA getting people referrals, right? And telling people about going there. So I was accomplishing that goal without even realizing it. It's really bad business advice. I don't recommend doing it. I recommend learning how to do that and develop a better system. maybe talk to someone like GR to maybe do some automations. Back in the day, automations like this didn't really exist.
Yeah.
So I did what I had to do, but it's focused on the service and focusing on getting people to experience that service.
Connor, what you got?
I'm right along with him. Mark and I started out very similarly. It was like, you talk about the power of free. That was popular back in the day. I just went to as many places that I knew of that kind of knew me, coaches and all that stuff. And I just tried to display what I was able to do and what I could do for them. And then just try to get them in the door. Like you said, it's like trying to get as in front of as many people, or like your target customer, your target avatar, and then getting them into your doors and just trying to provide the best possible experience over and over again. It's difficult because there is so much information out there, and here we are adding more information and knowledge to the interwebs, but it's so easy to get caught in like tunnel vision of saying, hey, I have to be doing this because this is the next step that I need to get to. And a lot of times you forego providing that day in and day out session experience to where if you can focus on your actual product in this stage one business, I think there's unlimited growth in terms of, maybe not unlimited, I should backtrack on that. There's way more juice left squeeze before moving to that stage two. There's so many different levers that you can pull while you're still in that stage one, as long as you're focusing on getting in front of people, showing people what you do, getting them into your business, and providing a great service and experience.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. The note that I have here is, it's like the bottlenecks for moving to stage two. So say that you are in stage one, you're self-employed survival mode, and you want to move into stage two, right, where you actually have a team, you're starting to delegate more, you're creating a little bit more freedom for yourself. The other bottleneck I have in stage one is a business model. So if you're priced, like you're trying to do small group training for $50 a month, like you're never going to have the margin to be able to delegate. You're going to get a full business, you're going to be full, and you're not going to be making any fucking money, and you're going to be miserable. And then you also are not going to be able to delegate your way out of it because you started with a broken model. And so there's probably I think we probably would need to do an entire episode on that. So talk about, hey, if you're starting out your gym, let's make sure that you're priced appropriately for your model and whatnot. But you do want to make sure that you are charging an amount that if you were to delegate and replace yourself, you're not going to be up shit creek without a paddle from a financial perspective, both in the business and personally. Because if you don't do that, you're not going to be able to delegate. You will forever be bottlenecked in that stage one. And I see that as, I don't want to say as frequent of an issue in terms of people being basically held back from being able to delegate. Because a lot of times it's just, oh my God, I have no idea how to market. It's more competitive than it was when we started. There's more adult businesses to compete with. Orange Theory wasn't as much of a thing. You're competing. And then back in the day, you had a couple of providers, but maybe it was some CrossFit people who showed up late was probably the most popular thing. CrossFits and boot camps and shit. And so marketing, I think, is up there as the most frequent challenge we see with, hey, you've got to get some opportunities. You got to get people to come in and experience your service, to talk to you, et cetera. But the other side, and we see this super often in the agency, is like, hey, I'm charging $150 a month for small group training. And I need to be making, we look at your financials and things like that, and I need to be making $150 a session to be at any sort of reasonable profit margin. And I'm basically like bottlenecked at, like, with where my model's at right now, I can only make 100. Well, if you need to make 150 to have a decent margin, and your business maxed out can only make 100 a session, something needs to fucking change. So the model, I think, is another sort of additional bottleneck. You can probably jump in, like, again, I think at some point, by the time you guys are listening to this, there may be free content and like group coaching calls that you guys can hop on. Go to our Facebook group. We'll probably have that linked in the show notes at some point when we finally relaunch that. And maybe you can have a conversation with us about pricing without having to drop a bunch of money to work with us as an agency, because we're way too fucking expensive and probably don't have room for you as a client right now. But we still fucking love you. Pitch.
To jump on that, GR, it's such a dichotomy in this business world, because as much as we're just saying, hey, don't focus on the other fluff and the other shit that doesn't really matter and put all your focus in your product, you're 100% right, because there's a lot of ways to get there. And we've shown that we have different ways of getting there. And the end result that we want to get to is in our own right going to be the end result that we're going to get to, but there's a lot of ways to skin the cat. But at the end of the day, there's principles and there's simple math that needs to check out in terms of your model, that if you don't at least know like the basics on the math of the model that you're currently running to get you to that end result, like you're going to be screwed. They're not in our specific area, but when we were looking at putting a flex location into a suburb, like I kept hearing about this one location, and it was a single operator and he was killing it. He was providing a great experience, great value and all that stuff, but it was a large group model. And it was like, I don't know, like a functional training / boot camp type thing. And I did a little, I can't even say that word, did a little digging. And no matter what, like with his experience that he was providing, he's screwed because he can't outwork the simple mathematics. He was charging too little. His groups were getting too big. And then he was going to pigeon himself into a hole and he was going to be screwed. So yeah, we're saying focus on the product and focus on the experience and dive so deep into that and focus on it every single day as you're starting out. But again, if you don't have the basics of knowing what model you're going to run and what model you plan on running, and you dig yourself too deep of a hole because the math doesn't work out, you're fucked.
To get us back on track with that, because I totally agree with you. And I think that's an error in stage one of not knowing, like, but it's before even pre-stage one, knowing what I know now, or if I had like resources how I do now, it's like I would, like this podcast, listen to this episode, figure out a model you want to hitch your wagon to and go from there. You're going to save a lot of headaches. But during stage one, I'm not to say you need to do that prior to opening. During stage one is when you figure that out. And before you take that next move, you got to invest in time. You could probably invest in a little bit in that stage. But before you invest like hard-earned money, the cash you don't have, or make huge financial mistakes because you're going down the wrong path model-wise, you got to figure that out. That's a huge error. And it's definitely before you go and maybe make a larger facility or move to a larger facility. Definitely if you expand into multiple, do not expand a broken model for sure. And I can explain to that later why in our business model episode. But during stage one, that's a mistake of thinking like, I'm going to keep growing. I'm going to expand this model and this is what it's going to look like. It's check the math out, like we said, and then go from there. I have a question for you guys though. Stage one, it's not like stage two is better. Like stage one depends on the person, depends on what you want. I would also say during stage one is when you figure out what you want. But I would say, like, for you guys, like, how long do you think you stayed in stage one? What could someone, like, if somebody was like, hey, I want to maybe, so for me, when I got started, I was copying and mimicking other mentors of mine. Like, I knew I wanted to expand to one bigger facility. Like, to me, that was the pinnacle, right? So from day one, I knew I was going to do that. I didn't say I wanted to do it in a year or 2 years. Like, I was just going to let it come to me when the time came. But, like, how long do you think you guys stayed in there if you're trying to go to stage two?
Before I answer that, can I add something?
For sure.
Okay. I think what you're saying, where you're saying the stage one, you start to figure it out of what you want. I think, yes, back in 2011, when we opened, it was a lot easier to figure that out as you were going, because one, we were in really cheap, paying next to nothing for rent. There wasn't as much competition, like GR was saying, in terms of there was maybe a couple CrossFits, maybe a couple random sports performance places, whatever. It's a lot more competitive. It's a lot more expensive today's world if you're just starting out to figure out those answers as you're getting going. Yeah, you can tweak some things and massage some things out, but if you don't have those basics, like, dude, it's a different world is today.
Yeah, and I agree with you too, because there is so much more information now.
Of course you do.
Start a gym, go listen and research and go from there. So I 100% agree with you on that.
To get back to your question, I was probably in it for about 3 to 4 years. Same. Me personally, in stage one.
Same thing.
And again, it could be different in today's world, but I was probably in it for 3 to 4 years.
Mine was basically, I was stuck there until we figured out marketing. And then as soon as we figured out marketing, and Connor, you were there for that. This is the unfortunate truth, because I would make the argument that yes, while it's way more competitive, you can also make the argument that in some ways it is easier than it was 10 years ago, 12 years ago, because people expect to go pay 150, 200, 250 plus a month for training. You're not like, and this is everyone fucking understands that. Back in the day, CrossFit was, I know it had maybe picked up in some areas, like California was a big thing, but we kind of all started in the boom of that CrossFit boot campy warehouse gym type thing. And it was new. So you had to educate prospects on the idea of, hey, you can come get a great workout, because back in the day, it was personal training or it was Globo Gym. And it's oh, we can do this thing, but it's like $200 a month. This is weird. Well, yeah, but you had to educate the prospect more. Now people expect, they almost look for these like group training models, and you're not necessarily selling something new. You're selling something that people might know they want, that they have some experience with. So in some ways, yeah, it's way more difficult, way more competitive. In other ways, I think it's easier. Our deal, like what is absolutely harder is follow-up, because we figured out Facebook ads, and we stole Connor's copy and paste messages that he was kind enough to send me. I still probably owe him money for that. And my mom did, because I didn't have the time, because I was self-employed survival. I was doing all the sessions, all the sales, everything else. My mom would send those messages when people opted in for Facebook ads, and then they'd come in and show up whatever else. But once we figured that out, it was like 3 months, maybe. And then then I hired a full-time coach to take some of the sessions off my plate, hire an admin. Like, it was a rocket ship once we got out of there. We have folks that started with us. I mean, you guys know Cam. I can share his name. Like, we'll probably interview him on the podcast. He's such an incredible success story, but he was literally self-employed survival when he started with us basically a year ago. And today just signed his lease for a second location. And there's an entire other episode on, hey, motherfucker, like, you're probably expanding your shit too fast. Don't jump to a second location. Cam is good. Cam went from self-employed survival to figuring out acquisition very quickly, to having a team, to having a manager in place. And now basically, like, that location has been running essentially without him. Like, he's almost like an investor or board of directors role at his main gym. So once you figure out things and you have a great service and people stay, that trajectory can be super quick. And the model thing, to maybe ease people who may be listening and think, man, Connor's talking about small group training. It sounds like Mark is talking about kind of more small group premium training. Dude, we have folks that are crushing in any number of models. Cam is primarily one-on-one in his first location. It's all one-on-one stuff. His second location, he's trying to copy Connor and do the small group personal training thing. He was inspired by that. We have people that are absolutely crushing doing like semi-private training where everyone's getting their own custom program. We have people that are crushing doing more like small group type training. We have folks that are absolutely doing awesome with large group. I think large group is probably the most competitive avenue in fitness right now, but like, you can win in any fucking model as long as the basic math is right and as long as you can acquire customers and keep them around. The thing that I want to make sure does not get lost, because you guys so lovingly agreed with me on like getting butts in seats. If your service is bad, like, the best way to drive your business into the ground is to market it really fucking well and then have a shitty product. Because that word that you're the shitty trainer and you get people hurt or you're always late to your sessions, like, that's going to travel very fucking fast. So the benefit that we had, because it took us probably 4 years as well to get out of that first stage, is like, I had a lot of time to get good. And all I was worried about was getting fucking good and taking care of our people. And then once we figured out marketing, it was like, oh my gosh, I can apply this like really great service and knowledge or whatever the hell it was at the time to more folks. Those people stayed. And because they stayed, the business took off like crazy and we were able to move out of that stage.
I was so fearful of that. So it's like, I did everyone's, if I would go back, I don't know if I'd go back and change too much. I probably would, but again, it worked out. So I don't have too many qualms about that. But I basically didn't want to hand off the training until I had someone that was really good or I could train up.
Yeah.
Which that's always a common question in this stage. If you do start having success, what's your name in this stage for someone's like thriving?
Self-employed survival.
Yeah, there you go. If you're in that stage, you're still going to need some part-time help. And the worst thing that could happen is that, oh, I like you better than this person. And it's not just from a personality thing. It's like, they're just not as skilled as you are or needing the vicinity that you are as a coach, then to provide that level of service. I held on that quite a bit, but I actually held on to the admin side even more on the professional. To me, I didn't have the ability to delegate that or even systematize it or wanted to take the time to do it. So I was still training quite a bit, but then I did all the sales and signups and admin work and billing and all that because I wanted a professional experience from top to bottom. And if I knew if they came in, the environment sold itself and the guys there that cared about it, everybody and all that, which is great, check that box, we would blow it on the back end if someone dropped the ball. So I held on to that quite a bit, but probably a little bit too long, but I got good enough to learn it. But that's a stage one type, I wouldn't say a flaw, but it's definitely something that to think about as we start to expand whether it's under one roof or expand the model or expand whatever it is, thinking about, how does the stages change? So what's the difference between stage one and stage two, GR?
The bridge, because it's not just going to be today I woke up on Monday and I was stage two. Like, it is absolutely a process. The bridge of getting from stage one, where you are self-employed, meaning like you own a job. Like, to be very clear, even if you have a good business, I'm doing $20K a month and I have $2K a month in rent, and then that's all. Those are basically my only expenses. Maybe you have a little bit of marketing costs, whatever it is at that stage, if you're working with somebody like us to do your marketing. But realistically, your expenses are super low. You're making a bunch of money. Guess what? Like, you can't sell that fucking business, or you can sell it, but it's not going to be worth jack shit because you're selling a job, right? And that job is dependent on you being there as the owner and servicing people. So you do not have a business yet. You own a job, and that can be awesome, and people can be happy doing that, but you own a job. And so the transition point from doing everything yourself into moving up manager stage two is basically starting to delegate things, starting to move things off your plate, starting to fire yourself from the jobs that ideally you hate the most, you suck the most at, that are the least expensive to delegate. And that expense, I don't know if this was pre-recording conversation or not, but that expense is not just financial, but also the time cost of training somebody up. But you start to delegate and move some things off your plate. And stage two, to me, is like the biggest fucking one of all, because you start off like most of us, you're doing everything, and you have to delegate literally every single piece of the business off your plate over time. And that doesn't happen overnight. So what were the first hires that you guys made?
It's actually funny that Mark was just saying that. I was the same way. I got coaches in first, and I held on to the back end, like admin type work. Everyone always talks about, hey, get someone in, because most trainers hate all the back end stuff, right? All the admin. And it's just, that's the first thing they hired to get that off their plate. That was the last thing I gave up. It's funny. I don't know if we've ever talked about that, but I was the same way. I got someone, I felt more comfortable coaching a coach up, getting them onboarded and getting them up to the standard that we wanted. And so I got coaches in first, and I held on to all of the admin, all of the follow-up, all of that stuff. Very similar to Mark, probably way too long.
Would you do that? Would you recommend, if somebody is in self-employed survival mode or whatever, like they're doing pretty well, they got some margins, they're looking to start delegating, moving things off your plate, would you do it again the same way, or would you recommend people approach it differently?
Again, context is key here. It all depends, dude. Like, I think that I had the mind, and probably Mark has the mind, to actually have the wits about us to handle all that. If there is a trainer and you're a great trainer and you're developing a great business, and you literally cannot like put sentences together, and when I'm dead serious, like
I've heard them.
Dude, we have a facility leader in training or recently, and dude, he's awesome. He rocks it. He is great at coaching, great at developing like all the culture stuff. And we want to get him a book on how to use commas, because like punctuation, all that stuff is god awful. And so it depends on if the person, like, if you have the wherewithal to handle and juggle some of the stuff, because all the different pipelines and funnels, depending on what your business is. So if you have all that to stay organized, then I would do it the same way that I did. But if you're terrible at that, could be something to get someone in that's a little bit more organized and a little bit more focused on like the execution, because you keep putting it in the back burner because you don't give a shit about it. It's context.
Yeah, hindsight for me too. It's like I don't know if it was a little bit of probably a little fear, a little bit of unknown. Like I said, I didn't know how to delegate it. I had enough experience with it. I'm really glad I did it, because I learned a ton on it. Just like with everything else, we'll talk about in different stages. Even for me, like doing Facebook, I didn't do a Facebook ad for 7 or 8 years. Then I started using you, and still do. But it was like I learned enough to be dangerous, but I also learned enough to be like, I can't do this. I need to hire someone. There's a lot of moving parts as I can't keep up. But I know enough now to have an educated conversation. The admin and the business back end stuff was the same way. And now I know the system top to bottom of how to do that myself, but then also help our other leaders develop that now. So I really value the experience with what I know now and what's out there available as resources. I'd actually probably splurge and spend a little bit more. And I wouldn't just hire like an admin. I'd hire like almost like an operations person, because that one person with the right skill set would make running basically a part-time training schedule like super easy. The facility stuff, all that extra stuff that's just so obnoxious. Hire somebody with the capacity to do it, the skills to do it, pay him a little bit more, and then I would just either train, or I would then focus more on getting more people in the door.
Yeah.
Right? And so
how do you define an operations person?
Operations. There's so much value for me to talk through stuff with people, but one more person to hold you accountable. And if you have to delegate to somebody, it means you're going to think through it. It means you're going to give stuff the necessary attention it deserves. By operations, I mean more like facility, like manager, like in terms of run the facility, take care of everything that pops up, right?
So you say run the facility, what does that mean?
Run the facility in terms of, I'm thinking back to my original spot, which was really much smaller. Hey, there's no toilet paper, go get toilet paper. I don't need to know it's out. I expect you to do it. I expect you to check the mail. I expect you to return messages. And then, yes, I would put them on the computer for some lead follow-up. I would have them do billing or new member data entry and all that stuff, right? They're managing our softwares. Like, then there's communication, any communication that has to go out to clients. Here's an email, send it out. There's so much stuff to do from a tech standpoint. Like, one person in that role would have to know a lot of different things, but they're all like little, like 5 or 10 minute type things. And that's what they could solely focus on, which for you seems like daunting, and to them, until they start doing it. And I've done this before. They do it in 10 hours. I'm like, they're like, what's next? What's else? What else? I'm like, oh crap, I got to think through what else. So I also say that by saying that, hey, literally write out the role and put a timestamp on how long this stuff should take. If somebody was trained up, even if they weren't, hey, you do it in 5 because you're efficient and you're the owner and you value your time. Maybe this person is just different and they may take it 10. Fine, let's overshoot a little bit. All right, oh crap, this is just a 15-hour week role. Like, I could find someone like this. What schedule would I want them to do? When's the gym busiest where I get caught up, where someone walks in or calls, or I feel like I can't get back to people? That's when I would need this schedule. Great. Write a job ad and tell them this is what you need, and make it more so simple than that. Like, it's not as complicated as we build it up in our minds. Doing that would give me more energy, probably either to coach more or to pour into more clients, and or start to develop maybe a part-time coach to then I have the best of both worlds now. These are not huge investment type pieces that are deal breakers when if you're in the stage where you can support a staff member, right? A few extra $100 a month or even a week is not a big deal, because you're going to make that up with all the capacity they give you, and quite frankly, the headspace they clear up for you. So there's a lot there, but that's my thought for sure.
I think don't let me forget, if I leave this sort of thought unaddressed, make me come back to it. But we need to talk about the mindset of delegation and like understanding, hey, maybe there are other people that are better at and enjoy and do the job. Like, they can figure shit out that you can't, right? And in order to scale, if you actually want, and you don't have to want it, but if you want to create true freedom from your business, where you're getting paid without having to coach every session, you're getting paid without having to follow up with every lead, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you're going to have to be okay letting go of some shit, like from a mindset perspective. So don't let me hit on this, or don't let me forget to have us discuss that a little bit. But so you guys got 2 really good perspectives. My perspective when it comes to delegation, because this is fresh in my mind because we just discussed it on our coaching call earlier today with some of our members. They're like, I don't know what to hire first. Is, again, and I think this is, I don't know if it's traction or if it's a Lencioni deal, but there's a few different frameworks. Number 1 is the love and hate sort of axis, and then the great and suck axis. So most gym owners probably hate and suck at bookkeeping. If I use that as an example, maybe it doesn't take a bunch of time, but like most gym owners hate and suck at those things. So step 1 is I would make a list of all the different shit you're doing, all the different jobs you're doing in your business, and make a placement on that quadrant. You may love and be great at training. That may be something that you want to give away last, right? You want to hold on to that as long as you can. You might be really great at sales. You might love doing that, but you might hate and feel like you suck on the phone or doing lead follow-up or writing commas or whatever it is, right? You place the different jobs you're doing on that quadrant. The next thing that I look at is the time that it's taking up on your calendar. So bookkeeping realistically, like how much time are you spending? Maybe it's just 5 hours a month, 2 hours a month, an hour, whatever it is. But if you're super inefficient, like tracking the numbers and whatnot, maybe that is a chunk of hours. But I'm going to look at where am I spending most or the biggest chunk of my time, and what is the cheapest chunk of that time that I can remove from my plate and move on to somebody else. So if you are working with a bookkeeper, it's like they're going to be better at it than you. You're not going to have to train them up. There's not going to be a time cost of you training that person. And it's probably going to be pretty fucking cheap. Like you can probably get a decent bookkeeper, accountant person to keep you on the tax stuff. And it might be a couple $100 a month. That's a no-brainer thing to delegate. Marketing shit, right? We're not super expensive to delegate to. We're more of an expert than you on that shit. You don't have to train us. There's zero time that it takes to train us up on doing your ads, setting up your automations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And no, are we an employee in your business? No, we're not. But we also are going to take that off your plate and give you more time to go do sales. Move up and think trainer, think admin, whatever it is. And what I would do if you're sitting here, like considering what you should delegate first, maybe you don't love training, you want to get yourself off the floor, then all right, awesome. Make that the first thing that you do, just like it was for, like, it was my first hire as well. I don't know that I make the decision again. I realistically wouldn't, but it was my first hire. And it's just, all right, hire the person up, train them up, figure it out. If you have I think some people get worried and they feel like, oh my gosh, I need to have this like crazy employee onboarding system and everything else. And that's why I'm holding on to things and not delegating, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I've done it in this business where we'll hire a tech person, right? And I'm pretty good at tech, but I know enough to get it's what you were saying on Facebook ads, Mark. Like I'm pretty fucking good at it, but it's sort of like I just know enough to get myself in trouble. It is not my magic trick. It's not my Dan Sullivan unique ability. And so we'll bring somebody in for like tech operation system stuff. And I'll just straight up tell, look, I don't have every single like system laid out. Like this is going to be messy. We're going to work through it together. Like, how okay are you with that? Are we still going to be okay to go do this? Transparency and honesty is a really fucking good practice across the board. It works really well with bringing on team members. So you don't set the expectation. Like you don't have to tell them, yeah, I am Orange Theory. We have every system documented, every SOP. We have a full-on training library. You're going to be onboarded in this period of time. You might not have your shit together, and that's okay. You can just tell the person that you're hiring, hey, I'm a fucking mess when it comes to operations, admin, et cetera. And I need you to come in and make sure that the business doesn't go fucking ape shit because I'm training and selling my ass off. That's a perfectly like valid thing to do, in my opinion. And then have them help you build the systems for that position over time. So that stuff is off of your plate. I think there's a lot there.
Ruffle some feathers because it's how, like someone, a coach or a trainer, or sorry, a gym owner is saying, hey, I got a marketing problem. We got a lead problem. We got this and this. And I'm not going to address, I'll leave the service alone for right now because I'm big on the service piece, of course, especially from a training standpoint. But it's like, you don't have I ask a couple more follow-up questions and it's just like, you don't have a marketing problem. You have a system and a delegation problem. And it's because of lack of skill and or experience or no plan on the system front. Like your marketing problem could be solved with, oh, I delegated 4 hours this week to this person that I hired. And I created a system for us and I have 4 extra hours that I can pour into marketing. Hey, with 4 extra hours, do you think you could do that? So it's okay. Yeah, I probably could. I could probably solve my marketing problem with giving a little more attention, or I don't have time. You don't have a time problem. You have a system and delegation problem. And so it's a harsh reality. It's a very hard truth to swallow, but swallow it fast and figure out what you need to make a change and then go act on the change, right? To make sure to free that up. And then you find out the root problem that you actually need to solve to start to achieve your goal.
Can we just make sure that we clip Mark saying swallow it fast and make that one of the social media clips that we use? Please swallow it fast.
We need to get
Data dictates decisions. Yeah. You can use the word dictate in a sentence. Hey, Mark, how does that dictate?
I'll do that in our data episode. I got lots. I need to bust that out during the data episode for sure.
Bottom line on this stage one, I think we might have just stepped into this is going to be a multi-episode fucking thing. But bottom line on stage one is you will be forever bottlenecked in stage one. If number one, your service sucks, so people are fucking leaving. Number two, you can't acquire customers. Number three, you have a shit fucking model, so you don't have the margin to be able to delegate anything. And then number four, you have such a ridiculous fucking ego that you think it is impossible to hand off any aspect of your job, of your business to somebody else. Because only when you start to move shit off your plate. Does it? Let's go. Fucking bow. What color is the bow? Yeah. The only way to move into stage 2 is to start moving shit off your plate. And maybe we'll talk about that on the next episode. That's all for this week. Love, hugs. Appreciate you guys. Talk soon.